Okay, it looks like we're going. Here's another Photoshop show, number 5, and we're going to get into more non-destructive editing methods today. And but let me just let's get this stuff out of the way so I can see what's going on. And we'll move right into the actual program of let's see. Let me add my monitor capture, I guess. And I wasn't set up. I was just giving a demo on how to do all this. And there we go. Okay, so let me turn off my camera. And we are rolling. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing the whole screen. Yes, it does look like it. You got everything over here. So, okay, good. We're good to go. All right, so today we're going to cover some things to do with non-destructive editing. And I think that you're going to find some of this interesting, but let me first do a quick review of the non-destructive edit techniques I showed before. One of them was creating a mask so that you can paint out areas. Here we can just pick this for some reason. And so I'm going to make a copy. Here we'll just make a random selection. And select this brightness area. And just kind of add to it and try to flesh this out and get as much as possible. See, this isn't important how much I get. I just want to show you I'm making a selection, and now if I create a layer, I can make it and it'll have a mask. I can make it so I can do things inside of the selection is what I'm trying to say. So I can do things inside of the selection, and so let's get out a paintbrush and paint in a color. And now, so of course, anything that I do outside the selection doesn't take. So as you can see, if it's outside the selection, nothing happens. Okay, so I'm making a red sky. Okay. So, you know, you say, okay, well, so wow is owie. That's a big deal. However, I could also do this where I'm painting into a mask. So before I showed you how to actually create a layer and make a copy of a layer by dragging, and it would pop up with the copy and it would turn the selection into a mask. But this time I'm painting on a layer, as you see, just painting on a layer inside of a selection. So you see, and wherever it's not selected doesn't get painted. And that's similar to how the mask kind of works, is that where you've got black you see through to the layer that's below, and where you see white you see the same layer. All right, but let's go ahead and right click on this thing and we'll say create clipping mask. And I'm not clipping mask. We just want to add a regular mask. Let's see. Oh, it's not done in here. Okay. All right. Hey, this is live. What can I say? Oh, what am I doing? Of course, I just create a mask right here, the little button right here. So make sure my layer is selected, click the button, and bingo, it selects the mask. So now what was a selection has been turned into a mask. And as you see, if I click on it, you can actually see what the selection looked like because it was converted into a mask. Okay, yeah, you can tell I got late to the thing because I'm stumbling around here. Alrighty. So this is where I've created a selection. I've made a mask about it. Now I could go ahead, I could even remove all color. I can go ahead and get out my erase tool, or I can select all and delete. Not in the mask, actually. I'll do that. I want to do that in the content. Okay, there we go. So now I've gotten rid of all that red, but now I could go ahead and use a, say a fill tool or a color fill. And so let's go ahead and we'll paint bucket content in there. So you see it's filling it, filled it up everywhere. And if I actually remove the mask, hold shift down and turn the mask off, you see I'd filled the whole thing, and you can see over here in the layers palette, I filled the whole layer with red. But it's only showing where the mask was. And the nice thing about that, let's deselect. The nice thing about that is that I can add to the mask simply by getting out a paintbrush and painting in default colors, which you get your default colors by either clicking down here or you hit the D key. And so now I can paint into the mask, and if the more I want to see what's behind, oops, painting not on the mask, I can paint in black and see what's behind, or I can paint in white to hide what's behind and show more red. So again, make sure you click on the mask. So you have this over here. Then I'm painting on the red portion, the actual color image section. If I click over here, I'm painting on the mask. So I'm going to paint with black on the mask, and as you see, let me turn my opacity up. There we go. And so you see, I'm showing the blue sky again. And or I can hit the X key and switch the colors and show the layer that I'm on by painting with white. Okay. And again, hit X and switch the colors and paint with black. And I'm punching the hole through this layer, so I'm not seeing the red. I'm seeing the layer below. All right, so that's the basics. It's sort of similar to erasing, but without erasing. However, let's get some image content in there. So I'll throw this away. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a copy of this layer, but I'll make a selection. I'll just make a quick lasso selection here. Very, very sloppy. And I can always perfect this later on. Here we are. Very sloppy selection. And so now I'm going to drag this down to the new page icon and click on Make Mask. And bingo, I get a mask, and you see the white hole there. So now I can use this sort of like erasure. So as you see, I'm seeing just transparency where the black is because I've turned off this background layer. So there's nothing but transparency behind or below this layer, sort of like dropping into infinity at this point because I've turned off the background layer. I can also take this, and in this program I can invert the mask and have the hole be what drops into infinity. Okay, so that allows me to do a bunch of things. I could take my background layer and I could say I wanted to add another layer. Oh, I just trashed it. One sec. Make another layer. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to add a adjustment layer here, and I'll go ahead and add a hue satch. Okay, and I'm going to hold down. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And well, actually, this is kind of useless, but I just want to show you how you make it so it only affects the layer that's above it. Is you hold down the Alt key and click in between the layers, and that makes it so it only affects the layer below. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll just saturate what's underneath here. And you see, so now I've created this hole that it looks through that's all saturated in that way, whereas this one is not saturated. So let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and add another hue saturation. We'll just saturate this one differently. And this is where I definitely want to have it so it doesn't affect the whole thing. So I'm going to saturate this one. But you see now I'm saturating the one below too. So I don't want to be I want a separate amount of saturation for this upper part versus this lower part. So that's where I hold down the Alt key and hover between the two layers, between the adjustment layer and the original. And now I've got this one only affecting the layer that it's pointing to. So I can see make this one be the psychedelic version and have the other one be a little more normal. All right, though it's still pretty darn glowy. Of course, remember you can always make these effects and then fiddle around with the opacity and turn down how intense it is. So you can still make a kind of psychedelic effect, but not have it be glowing in the dark as much as that. And same thing with this one. I can turn down my greens a little bit. Of course, I didn't have to saturate the whole thing uniformly. I could just go after saturating the reds, for instance. And in case you didn't know about that, see, we saturated the master. Say I just wanted to saturate the reds. Let's bring this thing back. And we'll just saturate reds and cyans. I mean reds and magentas. So now you see I'm just bringing out the reds in back here. And I might want to also pick some magentas and hit them up a little bit. Yeah, there is magenta content in here too. So I definitely don't want to push that too much. Alright, so now you see I didn't go and wreck up the trees. I kept them kind of a little more subdued. Don't forget, if you're ever doing trees aren't really just greens. They're also always some yellows also. So you usually want to affect some yellows if you're doing individual amounts of saturation like I'm doing right here. Okay? Alright, so that's the idea there. Now notice I just did this to what's called a adjustment layer. This is the same effect as if I had taken this and instead of doing what I did with an adjustment layer, if I had gone up here to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and pulled this up, okay, then I would have been doing it to the layer itself. And that's still a viable means of doing it, that I could do my effects to the layer straight across, okay? And then come into this layer that's a copy of the layer and pull back on that opacity. But without having a background layer, it's kind of useless. There we go. So I can pull back on the effect and show more of the background layer. And have some adjustment. So it's kind of a preference, whether if you just so naturally always come up here to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, or you know the Control U shortcut key is how you always pull up your hue saturation, and you're just so accustomed to doing that. And go ahead and keep doing that. Just do it on a layer copy. Do it on a copy and do all your damage to a layer copy. And then you have the same opacity controls. However, the nice thing about using an adjustment layer instead is that you can see if I do my hue saturation move to this layer and I don't like it, I have to pretty much dump it. I have to throw it away, trash it, make a new copy of my background layer and reapply the hue saturation and change it. Because I can't just go back into the hue saturation control. Control U is going to come up, but I'll be changing the hue saturation settings for a layer that's already had hue saturation applied to it. And you may say, well, that's okay with me. I'll just go into the negatives with my settings. But if you like saving your settings and recycling your settings and being able to wiggle and jiggle till you get a good setting and then save it, then this is a better way because see, you have load and save. You can tweak for a week this way and kind of keep changing your mind. And with all these different, remember I did reds and greens and yellows and magentas all separate. And so you can keep changing your mind and then eventually, let's get that update. Eventually you can say, that is the perfect thing. I'm going to save this and hit save and save it as a hue saturation setting and load it in later on for a similar picture that you may have in the palette that you want to do just as much crazy damage to as I'm doing to this picture here. So as you're trying to make the psychedelic desert effect or something, I don't know. But so that's just another reason why to leave this as a hue saturation layer, adjustment layer, because I can just double click on that and bring this back up, tweak it again, resave it if I want to save the darn setting. Also, another nice thing about it, and you can do that on this too, don't get me wrong, you can do that on this version too. I can add a mask, and then I could adjust how much of the tweak, is going to be coming through. And you see I got my glowy trees here, and so I can go into my mask and grab a brush and drop its opacity way down and try to brush out some of the effect of this in here. So, and I'm lowering it. I've got low opacity, so you're not seeing radical effects, but I am making an effect. I'm lowering the intensity of this on those trees. Okay, and so I'm doing that by combining this layer through a mask. But the same possibilities exist up here in this version where I can still paint on a mask. I can still lower the amount of the effect by painting with a gray or a low opacity black on a section, and thereby affect how saturated I want certain areas. Now, there's a lot of people just like to pull out the saturation, not smudge tool, get that out of here. There we go. They like to just pull out the sponge tool. The sponge tool is in saturate or desaturate mode. But you no reason why not to. I mean, you can still do that. Just do it on a layer copy. But this lets me do some pretty wild moves with the hue saturation thing, and then go in and do something similar to a sponge tool and desaturate some of my oversaturations. Okay, so you're starting out really saturated and then kind of pulling back by painting with gray, and removing some of the effect. Okay, and or you could paint with full-on black and really completely destroy the effect, get rid of it so it's not affecting a whole area. See, like I'm doing right here. Okay, so that's an important thing as far as the hue saturation control. Remember, the real trick, especially in this layer here, when I didn't want the lower, well, especially if you're having your background layer visible, a big trick was to make sure that you had holding the Alt key down and clicking between them so that you make the adjustment layer only affect the layer above, right below it. Otherwise, it affects all the layers below it, and that would have especially been noticeable with this one. If I hadn't done that, it would affect all the layers below it. Okay. Okay, so I hope that's kind of clear. Let me take a quick drink of water. One other thing I showed you last week was, or last time we talked about non-destructive editing, and I mentioned this on a few different things, with the sharpening issue. And so let's pull this thing out and we'll do a sharpen on it. You could use a little saturation moves and some other things, but let's just go right into sharpen. I'll show you the quick non-destructive way of doing sharpening that not only is non-destructive, but it allows me to the further benefit of having adjustable light halo versus dark halo. Remember, the way sharpening works is that it creates a light halo on one side of the edge and a darker halo on the other side of the edge, and that gives the illusion of sharpness. It increases contrast for edge contrast by creating a darkening on one side, a slight darkening on one side of the edge, and a slight lightening on the other side of the edge, which creates edge contrast, which our eye perceives as sharpening. So we're going to do that. So again, this is as opposed to converting the background layer to a layer and sharpening the thing itself. We're going to pull this down, make a copy. We're going to pull out our filters and get our I'll just use on sharp mask. And it's quite intense here. Radius pretty high. Let's see. Yeah, I'll leave it up there. So it's pretty darn sharp. Now, that's way sharp. There's a couple of different approaches to this, to sharpening. One is called high loam, which stands for high. What does it stand? Higher loam. Yeah, high radius, low amount. So it's where you lower the amount, but you boost up the radius. Okay, like mad, to these outrageous numbers, to where, and then you use that as a sharpening technique. It's also useful as a color correction technique, believe it or not. But so that's one approach. But the approach that most people use is low radius, high amount, and they push up the radius pretty darn high. And I recommend, in doing it this way, that you really push up that radius. And let me just pull out Sizer so I can show you. Yes, no, not Sizer. Zoom it. MIT. There we go. Okay, now I'll be able to, oh no, I won't. Those shortcut keys are in use. Let's see. That didn't seem to work. Z-O-M-I-T. Oh. Oh. Well, okay, forget that. I thought I had Zoom it installed in this version of Windows, but I don't. Okay, well, you just have to live without my zooming in. You can see the light halo here on the edge and the darker halo on the inside edge, and that's how this is all working. So we're going to just go ahead and kick it up there so we have a ton of that since we're doing this on a copy. And keeping the radius down at 2. So we got a really distinct light edge and a really distinct dark edge, okay? Then, so make it so that we, and let's go ahead and zoom in on this so that you can see what's happening. Okay. And, stop it. That's really seeing what's happening. Okay. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so we're going to work at this huge magnification. So now I'm going to change this to darken mode. Okay, and there's darken right there. By going to darken mode, look what happens to the light halo. The light halo just disappears. Okay, so what's happening with darken is that only places where the upper layer will darken the lower layer does the blend work, does the blend take action. Okay, so that's what the darken mode does. And so consequently, since the lighter halo is lightening the layer below, it would have a lightening effect. It doesn't show up, it disappears. Okay, so again, let's look at that normal. And you see you have the darken and the lighten. And then let's get darken. There we go. And you see the lighten completely disappears. So, and let's look at lighten now. And now you see the dark layer, the dark halo component of the halo has disappeared. So that implies that you have separate control on a layer by layer basis based on this blending mode over how much it sharpens. So I wanted to show you that again because it's one of those really cool things that you have this capability. So now you see I've got this one, and so let's go ahead and give it a name. This is the darken sharp, and this is the light and sharp. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our light and sharp, and it's pretty intense, and usually you can pull it back a whole ton. So I find for many shots you don't need more than 25 to 35% of opacity. That the default way that the sharpen works usually is so intense that you wind up pulling it back a lot more than you need to. You can get much better effects, and you can even reduce the effects of out of focus this way. So let's go to the darken, and we'll reduce that a bit, because remember, we did overkill. We purposely overkilled like a lot. So now we've got it. So we've had individual control over how much the dark edge is versus the light edge. So let's go ahead and look at this at 100%. You just double click your magnifying glass, and it's always a good idea to do your sharpening moves at 100%. And you do that by double clicking on that magnifying glass. Okay, which is the zoom tool. If you want it to fill the picture, to fill the screen, to fill the frame, you double click the hand. You want it to be at 100%, where it's one pixel for each monitor pixel. Then you double click the zoom tool, or the magnifying glass. So now we're getting a good shot, and I'm looking at this edge, and it still looks like my light halo is a little bit intense for that picture. So I'll go ahead up here to my lighten, and see I dropped that. I had it at 47, and like I said, usually around 27 is plenty enough. And yeah, in this case, I would say that's true in this case too. As far as the darken, that's looking, yeah, see where it's kind of obvious. If it's obvious and I can really see the dark edge, I usually pull it back a little bit. The other way of doing this, though, of course, is to just do it as a regular sharpening and leave, don't push it as hard when you're doing the sharpening move. And so that you don't have to pull back the darkness at all. So it's only the lightness that, the light halo, that's really hurting your eyes. and but just the darkening halo all by itself can pull sharpness out of even a blurry, unfocused picture. Okay, where the subject moved. So, all right, so that's as much as I gave that, and so now we'll go ahead to the full, and we'll do we'll alt click on this eyeball to turn off the sharpening and turn it on, and you see quite a difference. Quite a difference. Let's go ahead back to the larger view. I'll turn it off and on. So there you go. Back and forth. There you go. So see, this is a little bit fuzzy actually. It's a little bit out of focus, but it really seems to come right back into focus when I bring in that move. And since it's so scalable and adjustable, you can always come back. You can save this as the layers, and sure, just make your JPEG by going to Save for Web up here, and it'll take and flatten the layers for you in order to make a JPEG. Okay, and so that you can make your version for the web, make a JPEG or a PNG or whatever. And but when you're saving this, save it with all 3 layers. Why not? Now that's another use, by the way, for what I consider a final stage of what I've just showed you. This sharpening step is really pretty much the last stage you're going to do. Okay, and in fact, this is really pretty important. So I really want to look you right in the eye and just say, look it. This is the last thing you're going to do, because it's different amounts of sharpening that are going to be sufficient or logical or make sense, depending on whether it's a web image or going to be for print. For print, you usually, practically always, can sharpen a heck of a lot more than you can sharpen for the web. Okay? So because of the way printing works in these little, rosettes of color, you usually can sharpen a little bit harder in order to get a good result as a print document. And for small things, you can really sharpen the heck out of it in order to get good results. But it's the last thing you do, and it's something that you do with the final. It's a grand finale movement. So that's why I'm going to show you this next step. I want to show you how I'm going to take this. Let me just find my check box. I'm going to take this and use duplicate in order to get my final. That's going to be my sharpening version. Okay, so let's do that with this other image here. So let's say I've done all these moves, done all kinds of tweaking. I've made my psychedelia. Okay, and to me, it's really still not even psychedelic enough. I mean, it's not crazy enough. I still need one more. And I'm going to put up top here and add an adjustment layer and drop its opacity. And I'm going to do a color blend and add an adjustment layer and hue saturate. Yeah, why not? Hue saturation. And I've got to have my blues more intense. Okay, I just got to have. Oh darn, it's not working for me. I'm after the skies. Can you tell? I'm after the skies, and it's not working. It's got to be cyans or something. Let's see. Oh, I just can't get that blue what I want. Okay. All right. I'm wasting time here. Get rid of this. Stop it, Terry. Stop it. You're a maniac. All right. So I got this crazy picture, and it's got all these different layers, but I don't want to go ahead and now. You go, okay, well, how are you going to make that trick that you just showed me? Where you had this background layer and you copied that and then you made a copy of it and you sharpened the copy and then you made that lighten and you copied it and made it darken and, did all that. Well, how do you do that with this mess? Look I got all these layers. This is a mess. How are you going to do this? So this is the secret. This is how you do it. You go up here to Image, Duplicate, okay? And you click right here where you say duplicate merged layers only. And bingo, that's how you do it. You get a flattened version. You've not messed with your layers, nice layers version, okay? It's still there for you to save, so you can go back later on and make tweaks down the road. But now you've got this special version that you can then use to do your sharpening moves for print. So you're just going to, you know, go ahead and actually it's just Control J. Control J does the same thing as dragging the layer down and onto the piece of paper. Okay, Control J. And so we're going to do that, and I pull out the just unsharp mask, just reapplying the mask that I had before, and do the darken, and then pull this, go do a Control J, make a copy, and make this one lighten. Okay, so you see that took a lot less time. And I'm going to pull back my lighten layer a whole lot, and the darken layer is kind of intense, but yeah, there's right like that. Okay, do my before and after. Am I happy? Oh yes, I'm happy. I'm so happy. And bingo, take it into Save for Web, or make a TIFF out of it, or whatever I need for the printer. Okay, so, but basically, that's how I get my nice flattened background layer that I can now come in and do my sharpening to. All right, so it's all non-destructive, and I can save this, or I can tweak it for the print version. I can make another duplicate to do my print version, and I can save all of these. And that's not a bad idea, because you know, I've made these little tweaks and I've changed my opacity on these different layers, and I may want to come in and change the amount. Okay, now there's no adjustment layer for sharpening in this version, and I don't know if they've ever added it. I've not noticed anyone adding a sharpening adjustment layer. But this still, you can always save this and adjust the opacity, which is doing a heck of a lot since you got individual control over the dark and light layer. And all you did with the sharpening control is adjust, but the radius basically was the only important part, because you're adjusting your amounts after the fact using the opacity layer. Okay, all right, so that's my little segment on that. And the big reason I showed you how to do the sharpening was so I could really lead the punchline, was also I could show you a use for the duplicate. Okay, there's many other uses for duplicate. Say I wanted to do some moves in this thing that involved converting it to LAB. Okay, so let's say I had this thing and I wanted to do an LAB move in order to increase the red and green. I could go up here to duplicate image, duplicate, and I'll just go ahead and duplicate this merge layers only. And now I can go in and change my mode to lab color, and bring in an adjustment layer, curves in this case, and I'm going to leave my lightness low. I'm not going for anything but color contrast, and just bring this in 2 steps, and this one 2 steps. The main point is to keep the line going through the middle, so I'm not adding a color cast. Oh my god, look how gaudy that looks. And then we'll do the same thing to the B. And don't worry, I'm not going to actually use this the way it is. There we go. And so now I've increased color contrast like mad. Don't forget, this is an adjustment layer, and so I can pull back the amount of the intensity of the change that I've done. Okay, so I can dial it in just as much as I want, or I can leave it just at 100%, and I can go ahead and flatten this as it is, and which I'll go ahead and do, and I'll flatten it. I'll change its mode back to RGB. I'm going to select it all, copy, and just come in here and do a Control V, paste it in there. So now I got this layer that's my LAB layer, maneuvers, and I'm going to pull back the color on it. Okay, and so let's go ahead and look at that. So now I'm doing a similar type of thing, and yet I'm doing it to the entirety. Okay, the sharpened version. All right, so that was another use of the duplicate thing, was changing modes, because Nothing does a more interesting job or easier job for just increasing color contrast than the LAB mode, because when you try to do similar types of things, even the hue saturation control, I mean, you can use color mode and luminosity mode, whatever they call it. Yeah, luminosity mode. So it affects just either the black and white or the color. But still, the LAB mode does that so nice and fast, increasing the color contrast. And the other thing is, I could have made a move in here. I'm going to go ahead and throw that away. Yes, goodbye layer. Look at the difference. Oh my gosh. I could have gone ahead and let me back up a couple steps before I flatten. And I could have gone ahead and done a contrast move too, okay? And in fiddling around in here. All right, so say I did a contrast move and I brought that in. And then I gone ahead and flattened and selected all, copied, and paste with the changed mode. Oh, by the way, it will convert modes on the fly for you. Okay, you can just paste in, and if you're pasting into RGB, it'll convert it from LAB to RGB for you in this kind of a maneuver, as long as it's flattened thing. All right, so but now I have this with a contrast as well. Okay, let's say I don't want the contrast to be included, then I can go to color mode and it just changes much about how this thing works. Or I can go to luminosity mode and just bring in the contrast, the black and white contrast. All right. There's also the saturation modes, which have a more subtle effect, as you can see. But I'm bringing in what I had in this color, the color content that was in here, and bring it in here and applying it in different ways. By using these different modes, it makes the effect more subtle. So in this case, I'm just affecting color contrast and didn't affect the black and white contrast at all. Okay, even though I'm at 100%. So compared to that, which is the full-on picture. And the other way, of course, I can still, even with those, I can still pull back. So I can be in, say, saturation mode, and then I can decide I don't want it on full-on, and I can pull it back. But to me, there's nothing more pleasing than just hitting it with normal and... Okay, I'm mad. But another thing, another nice mode is overlay, which adds instant contrast to any image. And but you're getting the idea that I'm working with things that I worked on in one mode and switched modes and did my changes. Okay. All right, so let's get rid of this stuff. I think we talked about this picture quite enough. Now I wanted to talk about a little burning and dodging type of a trick. And I'm going to use this picture for that. And let's go ahead and I'll make this full screen. There we go. All right, so this picture, well, for one thing, a lot of people would probably jump in and say, well, maybe I should do some shadow highlight on this one. And so that's under adjustment, shadow highlight. And that would open up the shadows in here. Okay, and then I could cut down on some of the over brightness here by upping this and pull back some of my highlights. And look at what it does. It salvages these clouds that were completely lost in the background. Okay, so shadow highlight tool for any kind of a shot from inside of a cave, outside, where the contrast is so great that it really challenges your iris, your f-stops, and usually blows out the sky or makes the interior overly dark, like that. It's a great tool, but sometimes you want this contrast. You want to keep how it is with all this darkness in here. So maybe you could say, well, yeah, I want to save my highlights, but I do want to keep that really, really dark. But say it was only a section that you wanted to lighten up. You didn't want to be working overall on this. Well, of course, you could use a mask and selectively take out some of this stuff. So this is sort of a way of, similar to how most people would approach using a burn tool and dodge tool, burn being darkening and dodge being lightening. But you could do this effect on a layer. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's Control J, make a copy, and we'll go to the shadow highlight tool under adjustments, and there is no adjustment layer for this. And again, we'll restore our clouds in the background, and I'll pull this back a little bit, and because I want this rock underneath to be a little more dramatic. That's what I'm after. I want this to be dramatic. But now I say, oh, but I've over darkened this. Well, so okay, so what can we do? We can make a mask, and it's more non-destructive edits. Notice I haven't touched my background layer. It's still intact. Okay, and so I can now paint on this mask with a gray and change the amount of contrast. But in this case, what I'm going to be doing here, I'm going to be making it darker, because pretty much all I can do is punch a hole in here that shows through the mask. So let's see, make sure my opacity is a little low still. All right, so now here I'm just painting in here to darken this edge, okay? And being kind of careful, not really. Now, the thing to realize is that if you're painting at 100%, that you're just applying the maximum amount of masking effect. Okay, but that's not necessary to paint at 100%. But that's what I'm doing just for this demo. Okay, so it needs to say, because I painted 100%, subsequent paintings is not going to make it any blacker. And so there's my mask that I've drawn, and I can say, oh my gosh, the guy has no consistency at all. So you can go in, and this is, I clicked on the mask with the Alt key held down, and that showed me where my holes were. And you click on it again with the Alt key held down, and it shows the image again. So you get there, you hold the Alt key down, click that, and hold it, and it shows you where you painted with black. Okay, and all right, so that's great. And now I can so you can say, oh yes, and then you can pull back your opacity. Yeah, but now I'm pulling back the opacity, and my sky is getting lighter, and I'm ruining the whole effect, and this is damaging my psyche. Okay, so but you don't have to do it this way. You can also say, I made this too dark, I'm going to paint with grays. So one way of painting with grays is just leave this as black and lower the opacity of the brush, okay? Or leave it at white and lower the opacity. So I'm going to paint in some 35% white in this case. And you can hit your X key, and it switches between the white and the black. And the way you get to the default white and blacks, you hit the, I'll just change to red so you can see. Oh, I don't know why I just did here. Oh, it's showing it. Oh, what the heck's happening right now? Like foreground color. What's going on? My mode is right. Oh, I'm in the mask. Sorry. All right, you can't paint a color on a mask. It only accepts grays. All right, so there's red. All right, so if you hit the D key, you'll see that it changes to black and white. There you go, see? And if I had been on my mask and had a gray, as you see I have right now, hit the D key and it switches it to white and black, okay? So, but I'm not going to put a gray color in there. I'm not going to select a color gray to paint with. I'm just going to make it so I'm painting with less of the color by when I paint, by changing the opacity. All right, so what's that going to do for these various sections? And I'm already in white up here, so let's just paint with some gray up here. I'll do some numerous applications. And every application should be making this lighter and lighter, and it is. Okay, so every time you make a stroke, it gets more pronounced. So let's go ahead and see what I did. And you see what I've done. I've added gray, and I've stroked it enough times to actually kick in where it's white. So again, do it over here. And that's the color that I was painting with at 35% white. And if I paint again, it adds even more. The third one, since it's 35%, should be just white, or they're very close. All right, so it doesn't quite work that way, but yeah. But that's every subsequent brushing makes it lighter and lighter and lighter. Okay, so that's how you can use this as something of a dodge burn type of an effect, where I can bring out the lightness. But you'll notice I haven't actually lightened this any. Okay, so you can, oh, right, so you haven't lightened this any. What if you wanted to lighten this actually, and bring out, you know, lightening? Because just punching a hole in this mask, I mean, that's, I'll turn off the mask. Get out of there. There. Come on, turn off mask. There we go. So there's as light as it can get at this point. What if I wanted to use a dodging type of an effect? How would I dodge this, you know, in this image content? And of course, I can dodge my copy. I can actually get out my dodge tool. Oh, that's sharpen tool. There we go. And I can paint on this content and dodge it. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You can make as many layers as you want and lighten things up. And that's, you know, it's a viable method. And of course, with the dodge tool, it's the same thing as what you just saw. Every time you apply another stroke, it dodges it more. So most people even turn it down, the exposure, to lower than 50%. And the nice thing about the dodge tool is that it has control over whether you're working on shadows, midtones, or highlights. So if all you're wanting to do is lighten up your shadows, let me increase my brush size a little bit. There we go. And so I just want to lighten up the shadows in here. So we see that looks like crap to me. It's like, what's it doing to my? What's it doing? It's ruining the picture. What's it doing? Okay, so obviously you can tell. Can you tell I'm not satisfied with this technique? Yeah, you can tell. I know you can tell. So let's go ahead and we'll do another Control J, make another copy of this, and I'll move it up here. And this time I'm going to turn this thing off, and I'm going to make just a blank layer. And I'm going to fill it with gray. So let's go ahead here to get the paint bucket tool. And I'm going to click this thing, and I'm going to type in here 128, tab 128, tab 128. So that all three of these RGB fields are, say, 128. Okay. Also, you could have typed in 80, 80, 80 in the hex. And so now I got this gray, and I'm going to paint this layer, and now this layer's that color, right? 50% gray. Well, I'm going to change this thing to overlay mode and watch what happens. Boop! Oh, look at that. You don't see the layer. It's gone. How come? What's happening here? Turn it off, turn it on. It's gone completely. It's because the overlay mode only has an effect on colors lighter than 50% gray and colors darker than 50% gray. So let's go ahead and hit the D key or click on this little icon down here to get my default colors back. And get out a paintbrush. And I'll just... What happens if I paint with black? It's darkening things. Look at that. It's darkening stuff. Not as good as my shadow highlight, but it's darkening stuff. Okay? Every time I stroke this, I get darker. It's look at how evident it is on the mountains. Look at this. If I do this on this background piece. Okay, so that's doing a burn. Okay, and okay, let's switch, hit the X, change it to white, and let's paint up here. And look what's happening. I'm getting a lightening effect. I'm getting a lightening effect without it becoming this awful looking lightening of the colors, because all I'm having an effect on is a gray. I'm only affecting a gray overlay. So that means it's not touching the colors. It's only touching the black and white contrast, the black and white content. So I'm basically changing the contrast of this section. There you go. Just by painting with a brush in here, and I can alter it and make it more or less. Now there's a certain extent you can't get, you know, much lighter than you can get, but so there's what I've done. There's the mess I've made. Okay, that's all I've done, and it opens up that ceiling kind of nicely. Okay, compared to what it was. All right, so so there's before, there's after. Okay, now as you can tell, I've kind of damaged my my sky in here, so I probably want to paint and get that thing so that I'm seeing right through. Oh no, that's quite all right. It's done a good job with the sky. Yeah. So versus this. So now, mind you, I don't have to throw everything away. I can keep all of my versions. I can keep all of these different versions. I can turn this back on. I can bring this in and this in, and I can alt click and make this so it's only having an effect on the layer right below, and I can change its opacity here of this layer, and you know, until I get it there where I think that's pretty cool. All right. And then again, so now I probably want at the sharpening level where I want to sharpen, and again, do it that technique, image, duplicate. All right. Okay, so what's another thing that that's popular to know about? And that would be painting on a layer, I would imagine. A lot of people like to change colors of things. So, but that can be very non-destructive. Done non-destructively. Okay, so we're going to add a layer, and just a blank layer, and I'm going to paint with some. I'll paint with some red on this. Okay, so I got just a paintbrush and I'm painting, you know, yeah, 35%, and paint, and so you go, oh yeah, well that's so clever, Terry. You're just so clever. Well, all right, at least I'm painting on a mask, so I can still come in here and I can paint. I can erase what I've just done, okay, and get rid of it and alter it and have some control over where the paint goes, because I've painted on my original without painting on my original, so it's on a layer, so I didn't wreck anything. All right, so I'm a hero. I just became a hero because I was a little kid who came in with his crayons, and I drew all over the pretty picture of the prehistoric hands on the wall thing here, and yet I didn't wreck it, and so I don't get in any trouble because it can be undone. It can even be erased, and there's no problem here. All right, so what about the other kind of cool thing about this? So you can paint in color mode, and if you paint in color mode, then it only changes where there's color. So let's go ahead and paint in some color mode. There we go, and it alters things, as you can see. See, it's changing the colors in a different way. It's changing just the color content without doing anything to the contrast. So my contrast is staying the same. It's sort of like colorizing a picture, okay, using like the hue saturation and doing colorize, but I'm colorizing just in sections that I want to, all right, and very selectively. And that's what doing the color blending mode does, is it does this colorizing, selective colorizing type of an effect. So you're painting on a layer, it's a blank layer, it starts out transparent, and you put it in color mode, and now you're able to paint with your colors, and just change one aspect the of the image, and yet the original image color, the original image black and white content still comes through. So whereas when I was painting in regular mode, normal mode, I was ruining it. Okay, it was wasn't quite, definitely not the same thing. Even though I have it at a opacity level of 35%, it's just seeing through my opacity to something that's in back, but I'm obliterating the contrast. When I put it to color mode, instantly it becomes where I'm just colorizing it, and I'm not obliterating the contrast information at all. I'm not touching it. Similarly, you can paint with black and whites in luminosity mode, and you can simply change the contrast. Now, because colors carry certain amounts, differing amounts of luminosity, and the amount of density of it can carry that, you can have this effect. But I just think that there's better ways to do a lot of that kind of thing. But it can be used also to only change the contrast without affecting the colors. But it's just not nearly as useful or as common to use. Now, you can leave the layer at normal, and we'll go ahead and make another layer. I'm going to turn this one off and make another new layer. You can leave the layer at normal and instead set the brush itself up here, set the brush to color. And that will have a similar effect, sort of. Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. It definitely doesn't have the same effect. I thought it did. Well, what do you know? I stand corrected. It doesn't have any such similar effect. Not on a blank layer. I suppose, where it would have an effect would be if I was painting right on the original image content. Let me test that. And yes, if I was painting on the original image content, then it would retain the color contrast of the image content, because the color blending mode from the brush is getting its information from the image content that you're painting on. But if I'm painting on a blank layer, then it's the layer that's got to be in color mode, okay, for this trick to work. All right, good. All right, so you caught me. I forgot. I don't do this that often. Well, actually, I do this in layer 2. But I just was thinking, I was contemplating, you know, that here's that thing about the color, the blending modes in the brush. Now but just keep in mind, not for use on the transparent layer. This is for use on a copy of a layer, for instance. Okay, so if I did this and did Control J, and I was going to paint right on the layer. So the other modes also, by the way, all are there. You've got color dodge and all that stuff, and dodging members is lightening things, and or color burn, just to intensify the color contrast. Okay, so this is both. Color burn is simultaneously increasing the contrast and applying a color to the image content itself. Okay, so let me turn off these other layers so you can see. So this is the effect that got me. Color burn is simultaneously putting color information in there and playing with contrast. So, but I'm working on a copy, so I can pull back the effect, and I can even continue to change modes where I'm going to change the nature of how this all comes across. So you see what happened in overlay mode, only where it would darken the image did it have an effect, and it had a completely different, more granular effect. I think that's to the point where I want to kind of go into reminding you that these modes are kind of unpredictable sometimes of what they'll do. So experiment and play. Pull out an image and try out different color brushes in different modes, painting on image content. Pull out different brushes and paint in normal mode, but in different blending modes. on different layers and see what all happens from these different layers. Okay, see what kind of effects you can get. Now, mind you, we haven't even gone into any of these fancy things like drop shadow and bevel and satin and all these different cool other blending options. We've just been playing with standard straight ahead blending options where all we really do is mess with the opacity and the blending. And the blending option is what controls the sort of the formula, the algorithm that's going to be applied to the drawing. Okay, so let me just take a look. One last thing. Now let's say add a layer. Okay, so let's select this. And there's another one that I want to see if I remember. And yes, this is a very, very cool. I didn't even need this one. Okay, let me just undo quickly because I just did a test just to remind myself how this one was done. Let's say, remember I showed you how to do the duplicate layer using image duplicate. And that gave me a merged copy of everything. But say now I wanted a merged copy of this thing, just as it stands, with this at this opacity in the picture, and this part in here, and this part in here. I've done all this stuff to make this come out just like this, but now I want to work on a layer that I want to work on the whole thing with some effects or something. I want to try out some more techniques or a different adjustment layer or whatever. But I want it to work on everything, and I want to just be working on that layer. Well, that's where a special, really cool keyboard shortcut comes in. And it's Control-Alt-Shift and the letter E. Control-Alt-Shift and the letter E. And the way it works is that you hold down your Shift key or your Control key, and you select the layers that you want to combine and create a new layer that's already got them flattened into that layer. So it's flattening where it doesn't flatten the whole darn thing into just a background layer. It flattens it into a new layer. So let's try it. Control, Alt, Shift, letter E. And bingo, there we have it. So let's make that so it's the only thing visible. And as you can see, there we are. We are now this combination of everything that we were working on. So again, it's Control-Alt-Shift, letter E. Okay, all three modifier keys, Control, Alt, and Shift, and the letter E, will kind of punch everything that you've selected into this new layer that you've got. Now, say you didn't want this layer into it. So, all right, fine. Just don't select it. Let's see. And I may have it wrong. It may be visible layers. Control E. And you're right. I was wrong. It's yes, it's the visible layers. So whatever, it's not a matter of selecting these. It's a matter of which layers are visible. So if I don't want this, if I don't want that one in the equation, then let's go ahead and trash this. Then I just make this one invisible. Control-Shift E. And there we have it. Okay, so now we have the equivalent of that, and this is that bluing. Okay, so it's the visible layers. So that's what it has an effect on. It takes all visible layers and combines them into a new layer. Got that? Visible layers combined into a new layer. Control-Alt-Shift E. And let's see. How will we'll be in the mnemonic. How will we remember this? Ah, the eyeball. The eyeball. So whatever you've got the eyeball, whatever's showing the E for eyeball, whatever the eyeball is on, Control-Shift-Alt-E. And it will make whatever's got the eyeball turned on, and we'll create a new layer. Okay, so how's that for cool? And I think that's pretty darn cool. That is uber cool. And now you can go ahead and have different effects on the different versions of this combo. In fact, let me go ahead. So say I wanted to take the version that I have here that doesn't have this, the heavy blue in the middle. And turn off this blue, which belongs down here. Okay, so I just want to take these, I want to combine these two somehow. And do something where I increase the color contrast, for instance, of this one, but and then combine it with this one below. Okay, So so that's more possibilities, more possibilities. Or I can take this one that's got the heavy blue and just pull it back, and that just changes the amount of the heavy blue. Whatever. I could have done the same thing, of course, by putting this layer above that. But you get the idea. I'm just trying to show you a possibility that makes even more non-destructive editing techniques, more things that you can do. That when you're in a bind, you say, the only way I can do this maneuver, this trick that I want to do, this thing I want to do, is to get a flattened version. So do I go ahead and do like Terry showed me with the layer duplicate? Well, that merges all the layers. That takes all the layers and merges them. Or do I just want certain layers that are visible in this show that are going to be combined? So I only want this one, or I only want this one, and those are the only ones I want to use to make this new layer, this new version of a layer that I'm going to manipulate. And so this is what gives you that possibility. So Control Shift E, okay, Control Alt Shift E, and you get your results. So it looks like you've got to have at least one of the layers selected. You can't be selecting an invisible layer for this to work. All right, so there you have it. So now we have several versions of this. Okay, all right. So now you've seen duplicate, you've seen the non-destructive dodge burn trick, using shadow highlight with the layers, using different low opacity brushes and dialing up, or using the gray layer in overlay mode. Let's see, combining layers, Control Shift Alt E. Painting on a layer inside a mask or inside a selection, using color mode. Well, golly, that isn't everything I was going to talk about tonight. And look at that, it's 11 after, so I went a little bit over time. I covered everything. I even have an image left over. I have no idea what to do with this now, but heck, we've done enough. I think we've taken you far enough. So so all I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to make a duplicate of it, which is Control J, by the way. And I'll just go ahead into my famous shadow highlight. Open up that shadow a little bit. Bring down my highlights. Let's see. And increase my contrast. Get my mid-tone contrast a little more extreme. And do some color correction in here. Feels like, yeah, I can use some yellowing. There we go. And change my tonal width. Look at this, the man's mad, huh? This tonal width changes where it's going to affect. And radius, tighten that up. Okay, I did it to a copy, non-destructively. Just pull back the effect and combine the two layers. And watch before and after. Before, after, before, after. Okay, so there's your tricks for tonight. And I hope you had a lot of fun. I certainly did. I love showing this stuff. And so next week we'll be covering some more really cool Photoshop stuff. And I hope that all that's happened so far has got you enticed enough that you're going to jump into Photoshop and really just go wild and have a good time. Play with your tools. Explore those blending modes. And fool around with as many non-destructive editing techniques as you can until you're really comfortable with them all. Okay? All right, take care. Have a good night. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.